me to take it off? All right, are we ready? Good afternoon. I'm Vi Lyles, Mayor of the City of Charlotte. It has been more than a difficult day, especially last evening was particularly hard to deal with. Most of you are aware there was a video of the protest action that took place last night. And on that video, it appeared to be a situation that they're probably not the words to describe the way that it appeared and how it acted and turned out. All of us have known in this community that we work together, and we are working together with protesters that are coming in to protest. And then after we have the protests that are lawful, we have been dealing with protests that continue later into the evening. So last night was one of those times that none of us can be proud of, that we wouldn't want to see happen in our city, but it did. And I hope everyone is aware that that's not the kind of department we want to have for policing. It's not the kind of reputation that we want to have nationally or locally. So when you look at that, we have to understand that we can be better than that. I also want to say that the council met in closed session today, and you'll hear more from the manager about that closed session. But the most important thing about that closed session was that the council members indicated their feelings, heartfelt, about that video. We talked about a number of issues, but I think the one thing that the council all agreed upon is that we need to hear from our residents. We need to make sure that we ask the question, what is this pain causing you, and what can we do about it? So as an indication of the council's support, we have decided to host all of our residents on the front lawn, the front porch of your government center from 6 to 8 tonight to address questions and concerns that you have about protesting, about the racism that we have in this community, about how we police our community. We're going to be there to address those questions with you. But we're going to ask you to help us define what we need to do better. So we will do this tonight from 6 p.m. until 8 p.m., and we will do it this Friday night as well from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. This is the beginning of a community conversation, one that we need to continue to have, and this is our first step. So I want you to know that the Charlotte City Council, your mayor, all of us feel that we are in a particularly dangerous time right now. We can make a decision whether to actually work towards a better city, or we can just sit and let ourselves be found in a place of darkness. I choose light over darkness any day. So I hope people will come out and talk with us. I appreciate the number of clergy members that have said that they will participate with us. I appreciate every resident that's out there protesting because of racism and the way African American men have been treated. But I also would appreciate it if you helped us address the problems and issues that caused all of these things. So with that announcement, again, we invite you to come out this evening from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. to talk with us, to explain to us what's going on in your world, in your situation, and we'll do it again on Friday as well. Now I'd like to ask the city manager to come up and speak with you about a number of issues.
Good evening. I'm Marcus Jones, and I'm the city manager for Charlotte. And one of the things that I'm responsible for is the day-to-day operations of the city. Over 8,000 employees, and the mayor and the council appoint me for that direction. And one of the things that's so important to us is accountability. So whether it's solid waste or transportation, fire, police, we're accountable to you. So in order to keep public trust, it's important that with last night's events, that we bring in the State Bureau of Investigations to investigate what happened last night. So what we're going to have is a review of our policies as they relate to some of our policing and our procedures. And if those policies and procedures are incorrect during this review, we will fix them. If those policies and procedures are deemed to be adequate during this review, we're going to address them anyway, because what occurred last night is a reflection of us, and it's important that you continue to have trust in the leadership of the city. I do. It's an incredible city, and last night is not a reflection of who we are. So it's very important. I've spent time today speaking with Chief Putney. I spent time today speaking with the district attorney about how we move forward in terms of this SBI review. And we look forward to getting that information out publicly, because it's important that we be the best city that we can. So I'm available for questions, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
We're going to take a few questions, and so I think we're all accustomed to the process. We'll address your questions for a few minutes so that we can then go out and prepare to work with our citizens.
Our first question will be Hunter Sines.
Hi there, Mayor Lyles. Thank you for your time. I just want to know, in your opinion, should CMPD release all body camera footage from last night? And do you believe they should continue dispersing tear gas on protesters?
So this is really very important, because what we have to determine is how we can release those videos. I have heard many people in this community say that we should just release videos, but you know, the state law hampers that. So we're working really hard. As soon as those videos are available, yes, we should release them. We should release them publicly. We should have everyone have the opportunity to view them. And then we will look at them as a city council to determine what changes we want to make as a result of the review of the videos. Next.
Katie Peralta.
Hi, Katie.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for doing this. I just wanted to understand a little bit more. Were you guys able to get any answers about whose call this was last night, or what instigated this response from CMPD that seemed to be so unbalanced?
Well, that will be a part of this review. If you start to think about it, there have been a number of lawful protests over the course of the last 5 days, and I applaud our residents and our visitors who were here lawfully protesting, including somewhere between 8,000 to 10,000 people yesterday. But in terms of the call and who made the call, that will be a part of this SBI review.
Joe Bruno.
Hey, Mayor Lyles. With all due respect, you did not answer Hunter's question, so I'm going to ask it again. Do you believe that CMPD should be using chemical agents during these protests?
You know, we had a closed session today, and we talked a lot about this. My goal and the City Council's goal is to review the use of chemical agents as a part of maintaining order. Crowd control, absolutely not. We all know we have crowd control, and we should not be using any type of weapons except, you know, helping people do the right thing to protest, to be able to move through our city. We will have a review of the use of chemical agents upcoming.
Jonathan Lowe.
So my question, I think, is for the city manager, but thank you, Mayor, for being here. Thank you, City Manager Marcus Jones. My question is about RNC. We've seen a lot in the last 24 hours that has changed, and I know that through you all's Twitter account, you put out the statement about the city attorney getting in contact with RNC. What sort of update can you give us? Is this a done deal? It's not going to be held in Charlotte. Where do those conversations stand?
So we have our city attorney here, and we are directing all those questions to Patrick. So Patrick will step in.
Thank you for the question, Jonathan. I can say at this stage that the discussions are ongoing. We do need to clarify the intentions of the RNC in terms of exactly what they're planning on doing here in Charlotte. But as of right now, this very moment, all the parties are continuing to move forward as if the RNC will be in Charlotte. But that could change, and what the convention actually looks like could change. But right now, we're still moving forward with the RNC in Charlotte.
Allison Kuznets.
That you would give advance notice about issuing a curfew for the city. Do you think it's time to issue a curfew now, just seeing how protests have unfolded in Uptown during late night hours, and especially seeing mayors of Raleigh, Fayetteville have imposed their curfews already?
As mayor of this city, I don't believe that we should have a curfew. I do believe deeply that people ought to be able to protest. I think they ought to be able to protest within the law, and I think that a curfew limits that right, and I do not believe that. Now, it is one of the tools that we have, and I do recall where the city has had a curfew, but not around protesting of issues that are great in the forefront of the community, especially around areas around race and things that have to do with policing. So no, I don't see us doing a curfew. I would hope that we will continue to be able to have protests to occur and do it in a safe manner, both for the people that are protesting as well as the communities that they're protesting in.
Robin Kennedy.
I wanted to ask about the RNC as well. As you know, they have said they're moving out. They are going to select another city for the nominating process. Wanted to get your reaction. I know the city has a contract with them still. So will you fight to keep the RNC in Charlotte?
As I mentioned, we need to have clarity from the RNC specifically, and we're really talking about the parties to the contract, and we need to hear from the parties to the contract. And in this case, it's the Republican National Convention that we need to hear from directly. We have asked for clarity with their intentions based on some of the tweets and other releases that were made last night. So there are going to be ongoing conversations. I know we've got a conversation tomorrow that I'll be a part of, and so essentially stay tuned, but we need clarity from them in terms of what their intentions are with regard to the obligations of the contract.
Brian Anderson with the Associated Press.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Yes. Thank you so much. I had a question for the city attorney, and I just wanted to know, following up on the RNC, you mentioned there's going to be a conversation tomorrow. Can you just say who's going to be involved in that and what's going to be discussed and who will be present? But also you said we need to hear from the parties to the contract. And I'm curious what obligations within that 94-page document from July 2018 would obligate the RNC to stay in Charlotte or pay some sort of penalty for leaving. So if you could just speak to the terms of the contract and that meeting tomorrow, I'd be most appreciative. Thanks.
I understand. I don't have the contract in front of me, so I can't give you verse and phrase, but the contract does speak to the RNC holding their convention in Charlotte, and then there are various obligations of the parties, and certainly from the city of Charlotte's perspective, we have met all of our obligations, but ultimately when you meet those obligations, there is the expectation that each party will continue to perform. So that's the conversation that we're having, is based on the communications that occurred last night. We need to hear directly from the RNC in very plain terms what their expectations are as it relates to fulfilling their obligations under the contract contract. That's part of the conversation that we're having tomorrow. Tomorrow is actually a regularly scheduled Thursday meeting that we have with all of the parties. So to answer to your question, all of the parties that are involved in this contract, which includes the city, the county, CRVA, the Hornets, and the RNC, and the local host committee as well. All of those parties will be a party to that conversation.
Lecrae Mitchell with CBS News.
Is the RNC contractually allowed to move this convention to another city?
I would say absent a breach of the contract by one of the parties, the expectation is that the parties will perform as scheduled under the contract. So we would expect that since we haven't breached the contract, and I'm not aware that any of the other parties have, that the RNC would fulfill their obligations under the contract. Yes.
Steve Harrison.
My question is the city going to stop in the meantime spending money on preparing for the convention in terms of money spent on security? Because you might not need all of it, or are you going to continue to spend money and move forward as if it's a normal event?
So that's one of the concerns, and great question, Steve. That's one of the concerns that we have going forward is we're now at June 3rd. This is the high gear season for the convention, and we all have known that. So that's why it's really important to understand exactly what the communications that came out yesterday by various parties, what those communications actually mean going forward, because it's going to be a concern if we're spending money for if the intention is to go somewhere else and take the convention completely away from Charlotte. So those are part of the conversations that we're having is, again, what are the intentions of the RNC? What is this convention going to look like? What are their plans? And we need to know them much sooner than later, given the communications that occurred yesterday.
Joe Marisek with the Charlotte Observer.
Hi, question for the mayor. I was hoping you could address more specifically, we're living under a state of emergency and what that means to residents. I mean, what it addresses, what it does not address. For instance, does it address crowd control, or can I bring a pocket knife, have a pocket knife in my pocket, or does it more address what resources you can bring from the state and which one?
I couldn't hear everything that you asked. What I prefer is that we send you a copy of the document and you can see what we can choose from. So, for the city council, we look at things like curfew. We can actually close stores that sell alcoholic beverages. None of those have been used in this situation now. We could request the National Guard. Again, we just want to have those ideas out there and options available if we need them. Fortunately, we have not needed them. And we can get you a copy of the document as well.
Hannah Smoot.
Hi, Mayor. Can you tell us exactly what chemical agent was used last night? And also, you had mentioned that there will be a review of the use of chemical agents coming up. Is there any timeline on that, considering there will be, further nights of protest, including tonight, likely?
Well, I expect that a review would take some time, and we want to get the right information and be able to compare ourselves to other communities, compare ourselves with other departments, and see how people are using this. At the end of the day, what I hope for is that when we have the time, that we've stopped marching in the streets, that we've started marching in places where policy can be made, where we can address people's concern. And I would say the review will last as we get the data in and as we engage the community to comment about it. What we want to do is get it right. It doesn't mean get it fast. It means to get it right. But my thinking is that I think that we have to look at the policy and get familiar with it. We have to ask for data around what other people are doing, and then ask the community to look at that data and see what they think we ought to be doing before we make a decision. But it will be sooner than later. This is not a one-year process. I expect we will join a number of cities looking at every aspect of how we do crowd control, how we look at people as protesters, how we will increase our communications. There's so many things, but in the midst of the moment, right now we're just trying to ensure safety for protesters every day.
Ashley Fahey.
Thanks for taking my question. I did have a question follow-up for the RNC. How much has the city spent so far? And if the RNC were to move to a different city, would the RNC be contractually obligated to reimburse that?
So it's my understanding that the city has spent approximately $14 million that we do expect to be reimbursed from the grant. I don't want to speculate about terminations or breach of contract, other than to say that when the parties entered into this contract, they entered into the contract with good faith that all the parties would fulfill their duties and obligations under the contract, and that's the expectation of the city of Charlotte.
Lecrae Mitchell.
My other question is, are you concerned that the recent events with the CMPD and the protests that you all are addressing in, tonight's conversation with the community, are you concerned that any of that may come up as you have these conversations about the RNC potentially being hosted still in Charlotte and how that might play into those conversations?
I think that we continue to get emails, we get phone calls about this. Now, the emails are generally around 2 or 3 items. First, how do you have a convention when you're in an emergency order for the pandemic for COVID-19? The second one was, who else will be coming with the regular delegates that might cause problems or not be interested in operating in a safe environment? And then the third one, I think, would be capacity. People are still saying, how do we know that we'll be able to handle what could be a very contentious presence by the president? And how do people, that divisiveness that people feel about the president will be something that I think will drive a lot of the security. But all in all, I know that we as a city have the goal to keep our residents healthy and well, so that takes care of the pandemic. We will follow those guidelines from the governor. Security, we will work really hard with the Homeland Security and Secret Service if this event takes place. And finally, I can't speak to the country, but for my community, the city that we love so much, we will not let divisiveness create separations. We've already had enough of that, and we will not continue it. So I'm going to end with this note. We appreciate all of your questions tonight, but right now we want to go out and talk to the people that live here and get their ideas. I hope that the community will be able to come out this evening from 6 to 8. All of the city council will be out. I will be out. We will have people that are ready to talk with you to find out what we need to be thinking about and what we need to get done. Thank you very much.